Let me go ahead. Thank you very much for everyone joining us on this Monday Ruby Lux Talk, as we always do. We really do appreciate your presence. And if there's anybody who's new, we welcome you to this beautiful community where we share knowledge and information that can assist us to get a better understanding of the Bitcoin and cryptocurrency space so that we are able to be in a better position to make well educated and well-researched decisions about the things and the platforms that we participate in this big new industry where a lot of things are going on, right? So just a brief introduction to myself, because I'm not going to assume that everyone knows who I am. My name is Kitu Mezibiko. I'm based in South Africa, Johannesburg, and I grew up in a rural area in a place called Northwest Mabiskral. And I completed my schooling and then went to university, the University of Cape Town, to study economics and economic history. And this economic history subject is what fueled the passion that I currently have, which is that of monetary history, and which has led me to coin myself a monetary historian. So I'm really in love with the studying of the history of money, the history of economies, and how economies work and interact, and how power is defined by economies and resources, right? So this is what led me to eventually find out the transition, the major transition that our financial system in the planet is going through, led by principally Bitcoin. And I just wanted today to, we're going to speak about something called network effects, which is mostly a technology-based discussion. And I will explain to you why, I'll use network effects to explain to you why Bitcoin is perhaps one of the most successful platforms ever invented, and why it will be extremely difficult, almost nearly impossible for any other product to trump Bitcoin, right? We will get into the technicalities of that as we proceed. And in terms of network effects, I will be linking that with something called first mover advantage. It's something that is studied in economics in a subject called game theory. I won't be going too technical. I'm just going to touch on it a little bit just to give you an example of what we are talking about, and just to show you why, systematically speaking, at this point in time, it's really almost impossible to defeat Bitcoin or to create something that is better than Bitcoin and that can be more successful than Bitcoin, right? This is why we spend as much of our time and energy investing in Bitcoin, because we believe that it is the winner. And the case that I'm going to be making today is of that. I'm not going to be taking long because this can be a very technical discussion and I don't want to be technical. So I'm just going to try to make it as simple to understand and to digest as possible. And then we can then get into questions that you have about the specific subjects that I'm going to be discussing tonight, or any other thing that you want to ask about related to the cryptocurrency space or Ruby Lux specifically, right? So just to premise the discussion, I just want to read something for you. We encourage people who love to delve deeper into the Bitcoin rabbit hole to read this paper. We haven't spoken about it on this platform, but I wanted to bring it up so that people can really get to grips and to a closer understanding of what we're talking about, to fall in love to some extent the way that we have with this thing called Bitcoin. And the best way to do that is to go to the beginning of it. In 2008, when this thing was launched, it was launched through something called a white paper. Right now, a majority of people only know Bitcoin without really having gone through the white paper, because the white paper is technical and all those things. But since Monday is a platform where we go a bit deeper to understand the concept, I would recommend that each and every one of you please go onto Google and download the PDF version of the white paper. It's very easily available. You don't have to pay for it. You just easily go to Google and then Google Bitcoin white paper and download it and then read it. That will also help you to see some of the other concepts that are in there that we haven't talked about that might spark your interest. And then you can maybe come on this platform and say, hey, why don't you guys explain this better? Because I saw it in the Bitcoin white paper and I'm interested to find out what it means broadly speaking, right? So just to give you a taste of what the white paper is about, I'm going to read the abstract so that you can have an understanding of what these people or this person who created this thing had in mind when they were coming up with it, right? So just a brief extract, and then we're going to continue and get into tonight's topic, which is going to be looking at Bitcoin's network effects and first mover advantage. So the abstract on the Bitcoin white paper reads as follows. It starts off by saying, A purely peer-to-peer version of electronic cash would allow online payments, okay, which is something that is extremely important to us. That is where our entire business is based, which is Rubilux, on online payments and making them as simple, as secure as possible, and as efficient and effective as possible, and as easily accessible to everyone and anyone across the world. Okay, so this is something that Satoshi Nakamoto had in mind when coming up with this product. A purely peer-to-peer version of electronic cash would allow online payments to be sent directly from one party to another without going through a financial institution. That is the whole big idea of Bitcoin, to be able to have a peer-to-peer electronic cash system that does not go through a third-party intermediary, otherwise known as a financial institution, right? Digital signatures provide part of the solution, but the main benefits are lost if a trusted third party is still required to prevent double spending, right? We propose a solution to the double spending problem. I've explained the double spending problem when I was explaining Bitcoin. When I was giving you the history of where Bitcoin comes from since 1992, the challenges that the cypherpunks were having were facing when they were trying to develop a cash system in the internet. I explained to you that the internet is a duplicate system. It's a duplication system. When I send you an email, I'm not necessarily sending you an email. I'm sending you a copy of the email that I've typed on my computer. You cannot do that with cash, right? So you can even hear on the white paper, they are already referring to that. That was one of the fundamental problems that they were facing, the double spend problem, right? So they were intending on fixing this as one of the issues that they needed to deal with. So just to continue, we propose a solution to the double spending problem using a peer-to-peer network. The network timestamps transactions by hashing them into an ongoing chain of hash-based proof of work. This chain is come to be known as the blockchain, right? And then the longest chain not only serves as proof of the sequence of events witnessed, but proof that it came from the largest pool of CPU power. Here we are talking about the miners, going to be a very big part of what I'm going to discuss today. And then as long as a majority of CPU power is controlled by nodes that are not cooperating to attack the network, they will generate the longest chain and outpace attackers. The network itself requires minimal structure. Messages are broadcast on a best effort basis, and nodes can leave and rejoin the network at will, accepting the longest proof of work chain as proof of what happened while they were gone. Okay, so that's just the abstract that leads into the white paper. Like I said earlier on in the introduction, I would urge each and every one of you to please just download the white paper and read it. You don't have to be a technical computer scientist to understand it. Just read it so that you can become, I feel like it's a baptism of sorts when you're getting into the Bitcoin space, because this is where it all started for most of us, right? And then you can in there pick up some of the things that maybe you would like to understand further, and then we can assist you where we are capable. Now, just to get into today's talk, we are going to be looking at Bitcoin's network effects, and we're going to start off explaining something called the first mover advantage. Like I said, it's a very probably technical subject which most people might not understand. So I'm not going to try to go into it deeper. I'm just going to give you an example and a surface level explanation of what it is and how it affects Bitcoin. So first mover advantage, literally what the phrase says, that means that whoever does something first is most likely going to succeed in it, right? Now, when you study technology companies, this sometimes works and this sometimes does not work. In a majority of instances, it has worked. But for example, the first social media network that we know that was supposedly successful was not Facebook, but it was something called MySpace. I don't know how many of you guys here know or remember MySpace. There used to be something called MySpace, and those who are a bit older will know that. And in South Africa, the first social media network we had was called Mxit, M-X-I-T, right? So some of us who were in high school back in the 2006, 7, 8 would know what Mxit is. So, but today those companies don't exist, right? So that is an example of a first mover disadvantage, right? And then we have two other examples that I want to maybe get into a little bit later, which is Nokia when it comes to the cell phone market, and BlackBerry. So Nokia and BlackBerry had a potential first mover advantage opportunity that they did not take advantage of, which then gave the first mover advantage to Apple Computer. And this is in terms of creating something called a smartphone, right? Now, when you get into network effects, you will understand why Nokia was potentially going to be one of the most successful companies still today had they realized that they could have a first mover advantage in this industry, but they did not realize that. So, simply explained, a first mover advantage comes from the concept of game theory in economics that says in a game where you have players, there is an advantage, for example, in chess, that if a person who plays and moves first has over the other person, right? That's where I'm going to leave it. I don't want to complicate it. Now, in business, we say the first into the market can develop a significant competitive advantage through learning by doing. Now, when you get into an industry that is being established by yourself, you have an advantage that no one else can ever have because you almost determine the rules of the game because you are the first person to play in that game, right? So when you get into a place or a space such as smartphones, they have never existed before, right? Apple is the one that says, okay, we are trying to come up with this new thing. We don't know what it is, but we know that it's different from these other things that exist in the market, and it's potentially going to give us a niche market that we can get into. And then they eventually come up with it, and it ends up being the smartphone. And today, the majority of the cell phone market that people buy is smartphones, right? So in terms of that, the first person or the first company to get into the space and create this product was Apple Computers. The smartphone, if you didn't know, the smartphone was created by Apple Computers. It's not a product that was created by any other company but Apple, right? And then it has a significant competitive advantage through learning by doing, right? Making the mistakes, making the errors, learning the market, understanding the behavior of the consumer towards their product, right? And then this makes it difficult or costly for new firms or players to enter the market. In economics, there's another concept called barriers to entry. Now, you'll understand if you ever want to get into the mining industry in South Africa, it's going to be extremely difficult even if you have money because you already have first movers, which are the Afrikaners and the English mine owners who already have had mining ownership rights from back in the 1800s and 1900s. So they've been able to determine the rules of the game that are more advantageous to themselves than they are to people who try to enter at a later stage, right? Another thing is first movers can exploit internal economies of scale. Again, this is another technical concept in economics, which I'm not going to go into. But economies of scale, simply explained, means a person who's in the industry first is more likely to understand how to expand and scale their business in that industry because they already have the knowledge of that industry. They have already studied the consumer. They have learned by doing. Unlike someone who's new, who comes in maybe 2 or 3 or 4 years later than the first mover. Those people coming into that space not only have to learn and understand the market, but they also have to learn about their competitor. The first mover doesn't have to learn about a competitor because there is no competitor. They just need to concentrate on learning about the market and the consumers that they have in that market and then master that. As a result of that, then they are able to master economies of scale and scale much easier than anyone else, right? And also they build loyalty and repeat demand. Now, this is where we're going to talk about something called branding. Branding is extremely important, and I'm going to touch on 2 examples, which will show you why that is important. And then we have consumer behavior can become habitual, hard to tap into. Now, the examples that I was referring to now about branding are Coca-Cola, Apple, and Bitcoin. Okay, so we know, I don't know about other countries in the African continent, but in South Africa, we grew up, especially in rural areas and in townships, knowing that all soft drinks are Coca-Cola, right? There was a point where your grandmother would send you to the shop to buy Coca-Cola ya Fanta, right? So it's almost like another example of toothpaste. I'm a fairly smart guy, but I only learned that what toothpaste was at a very later stage in my life, maybe like sometime in high school, because I always knew that toothpaste for me was Colgate. Colgate was not a brand. It was everything that was in that market sector, including Aquafresh, all the other brands. I termed them Colgate. I only later found out that Colgate is actually a brand in the toothpaste space at a later stage. Now, Colgate has a first movers advantage in the industry of toothpaste because they've been able to brand themselves so well that people associate toothpaste with Colgate. They see them as one thing. Coca-Cola was the first soft drinks company the world has ever known. To this day, when you think soft drinks, when you think cold drinks, you think Coca-Cola. Pepsi came in, I think, 14, if not 16 years later. I stand to be corrected. I might be wrong with the number of years, but the point is Pepsi came in later into the game, and they've always been number two since then. No matter how they try to improve their product, you might actually find that Pepsi has a better product than Coca-Cola, but nobody cares, right? Because Coca-Cola has a first movers advantage. So that is the kind of thing that we're going to be talking about when we come to Bitcoin. And then Apple Computer is one I have mentioned before when it comes to smartphones. So Nokia had possibly the biggest network effects of any telephone mobile company in the world. It was the biggest cell phone company in the world. It manufactured almost every type of cell phone, and it catered for each and every LSM, from the lower middle class, from the lower LSM to the middle LSM to the upper middle, and to the uber upper LSM. They had and owned the cell phone market, right? So a smart CEO would have been able to realize and recognize what Apple was doing. But Apple was extremely secretive, which is one of the things that was good about them. But here's the thing. Even though Apple was extremely secretive, if you understand the power of network effects as Nokia, the minute that Apple launches a smartphone, you have more resources and more power and more influence to launch a smartphone, same as theirs maybe, and just make it different here and there, and just launch it across the world. And you are able to defeat Apple, even though they are the ones who came up with the product. Why? Because you already have this brand that is called Nokia, that is globally recognized. You already have resources and connections across the planet, whereas Apple does not have those things. Apple is just a computer company at this point. They know nothing about phones. The closest thing they make into phones is stereo. That's called an iTunes player, right? So you are able to take advantage of that. But then CEOs of Kodak, CEOs of BlackBerry, CEOs of Nokia did not see that. And therefore, Apple was able to make inroads and build this brand. Now, today, when you speak of smartphones, you speak of Apple. You speak of an iPhone. That's called an iPhone, right? I've had arguments with some of my friends about this, and it's not a necessary argument because if you're a reasonable person, you would agree that there are far much better phones in the world than an iPhone. For example, Huawei probably makes some of the best smartphones in the planet. But iPhone will still sell more than Huawei does. Because at the end of the day, it's not about the fact that you're making the best product, but it's about the brand and the loyalty that consumers have because they associate smartphones with this brand called Apple, right? And then we get into the cryptocurrency space. The first cryptocurrency the world has ever known is Bitcoin. First movers advantage. This is the first one we all know, the first one that has been successful. There have been iterations of it before, attempts at making this thing successful. They have failed by different groups and different people in the past. But this is the first successful cryptocurrency, the first successful peer-to-peer network that is based on the internet, that runs on something called the blockchain and is secured by miners who exist across the planet. It's the first of its kind. And from now on, no matter what happens, Bitcoin will be the first. It's the foundation. It's where everyone starts. So even if you're trying to build something that is better than Bitcoin, you start from the foundation, which is Bitcoin. right? So that is the first movers advantage. The fact that we only know the existence of the industry called cryptocurrency because of something called Bitcoin. Not Ethereum, not BitGold, not Bitcoin Cash, not XRP, not Ripple, not all these other things that exist in the cryptocurrency space today. The only reason why we are aware of the cryptocurrency industry is because of the first crypto, Bitcoin, right? That is very, very important to understand and to get. It's not a simple thing that you can just dismiss. That is why when you have merchants and businesses building products and companies within the space, the word bit will be there. It plays off of the initial name of the first product and the first platform in the space, which is called Bitcoin, right? So it's critical and important to understand that. Apart from the other things I'm going to discuss today, this is a very important branding thing. So Bitcoin is already a brand that exists in people's minds. When you speak of a cryptocurrency, a majority of people think Bitcoin, right? Remember when I was speaking about toothpaste and I spoke about Colgate, when I spoke about soft drinks and I spoke about Coca-Cola, it's the same thing in cryptocurrency. When you speak about cryptocurrency, you are speaking about Bitcoin, right? You might have different types of cryptocurrencies. If you really care about the market or if you are a trader, you will know them. But otherwise, if you're just a normal person in the world, when someone says cryptocurrency, the first thing you think about is Bitcoin. I mean, even some of the most educated people, for example, the governor of our South African Reserve Bank, when he thinks cryptocurrency, he thinks Bitcoin. Even some of the people in Wall Street, in the companies and institutions that are now looking into the space and looking to come into it, when they think cryptocurrency, they think Bitcoin, right? So that is the first part of today's discussion, first movers advantage. In game theory, Bitcoin has already beat 99% of the cryptocurrency market by being the first one to be launched successfully and to survive the first 3 years of launch, and then only to have sort of competitors like 5 years down the line, which is late because by that time you already had Bitcoin being having a significant competitive advantage through learning by doing. Because in 2009, 2010, 2011, 12, 13, a lot of people in the space were learning by doing. Understanding how wallets work, understanding how mining works, finding ways of making mining easier, more efficient, finding ways of creating mining companies, finding ways of creating mining computers so that people are not the ones creating or doing the calculations by themselves. So a lot of innovation, a lot of creativity, a lot of resources have been put into the space over that period. By the time in 2014, you launch something called Ethereum, like we already have Bitcoin. Ethereum has a long way to go. This is why even today, Ethereum is the second biggest cryptocurrency in the world, but it has a very small market share. Bitcoin is over 90% of everything in crypto. Some people will tell you, or you will see charts and stats where someone will try to logically explain to you why Bitcoin is only 60% of the cryptocurrency market, or 55%, or 70%. The reason I say it's 90% is because I've participated in trading before. And if you understand the game behind trading in cryptocurrency is people trade to acquire Bitcoin. They don't give a damn about any other cryptocurrency in the space. So you come in, you buy Litecoin, you buy XRP, you buy Ripple and all these other ones, and you trade. When they chow you, remember that before you buy those other cryptocurrencies, you initially have to convert your cash into Bitcoin, because Bitcoin already has wallets across the world that make it easy for you to convert your fiat currency into Bitcoin. So by that time, when you buy Ripple, when you buy XRP, when you buy USDT, when you buy all these other cryptocurrencies, you've already converted into Bitcoin, which means you are selling Bitcoin. And who are you selling that Bitcoin to? You are selling it to the exchanges that are giving you an ability to trade. That is Binance, that is 3Commerce, that is Kraken, that is Bitfinex. It's a whole array of them. They know that the winner is already there. They understand that the winner is Bitcoin. You don't. when you get into that space. You think you're trading because you're still trading to make fiat currency, because you still haven't understood exactly what's happening in this game. So they know that fiat currency has long lost. Even before the launch of Bitcoin, fiat currency had already lost. Now the launch of Bitcoin was just a nail on the head of fiat currency. It was finishing it off, right? So they understand that they have to get and attract as many people as possible across the world who can bring their resources, the energy of their fiat currency into the space, convert it into Bitcoin, and then give them those Bitcoins by converting them into other cryptocurrencies and trading them. And then just like in gambling, the house always wins. It's the same thing with trading. The house will always win, right? The bigger players in that space who have larger resources will end up with the largest gain, and that is Bitcoin. At the end of the day, they are playing to get Bitcoin. So you need to understand that, right? So this is why, the reason why I'm doing this presentation today is so that I can give you that understanding, so that you can maybe stop asking, okay, should I get into a trading company? If you understand the value of Bitcoin, you will know that that's not necessary, because you can acquire Bitcoin yourself. And as soon as you've done that, you don't need to give it to anyone else. I remember the last time we spoke, I told you that you shouldn't be selling Bitcoin, because big players, people who understand wealth creation, are in the space now. And they are looking at you and waiting for you to listen to those Facebook experts who tell you, yeah, no, it's falling, please sell, convert into your currency, into your local currency. They're telling you to do that. And behind the scenes, in the dark, you have Michael, the CEO of MicroStrategy, who's waiting, who's like, please sell it. As soon as you sell it, you will never see it again. Never. Because I'm going to buy all of it, and I'm going to keep it for my children and my children's children. Because he understands wealth creation. We understand speculation because we are poor, right? We don't understand how to create wealth because we never had money, and we don't know how to create and preserve wealth. But this is the reason why we have these Ruby Lux talks, so that we can change that mindset and understand that we shouldn't be giving away valuable things to people. We should also understand when we have valuable things, because sometimes you have something but you don't know that it is valuable. That's why you give it away, right? Okay, so now moving along from there, you will then understand that, okay, Bitcoin, I don't think anyone can sit in front of you and say it does not have a first mover's advantage, right? It's very clear from what I've explained that it does. It's the first cryptocurrency in the world. So now we move into something called network effects. And this is just an extension of explaining what first mover's advantage is. Now, there's a company that we like referring to, especially Anastasia, she likes speaking about it. It's called eBay. Most of you might not know the company because it was a big company in the United States of America, more than it was anywhere else in the world. But it is basically one of the first e-commerce companies, probably the first that I'm aware of, where it connected merchants and not necessarily even merchant. Let me just put it simply. It connected buyers and sellers, right? So it allowed you to sell your table that you didn't want to use anymore, your computer, your radio, and you're able to put it on that site, and then someone who has interest in it can buy it, right? Now, eBay is probably one of the most successful internet companies in the world. It's now a forgotten thing. It's in memory now because they also, they didn't go with the trends and realize where the world was going and then made the necessary changes that they needed to. But back in the day, they were very successful, and they only had two network effects. I'm not going to speak about eBay's network effects, but there's a reason why I'm telling you this. So eBay is one of the most successful internet companies in the world. They had two network effects. There were hundreds of thousands of other companies across the world that invested millions and millions of dollars trying to compete with eBay, and they failed, right? Each year, a new company would pop in and say, I would do this better. I have a better product. I have better systems in place. I'm more efficient. I'm faster. I'm safer. All these things, spending a lot of money investing in those resources, but eBay would still beat them. Because, number one, first movers advantage. They already had the consumers. The consumers are like, hey, dog, we don't need to change unless you do something extremely revolutionary. But like if you improve by 5% or 10%, it's not worth me changing my entire life to go into your system. I'm already used to being in using eBay. So I'm just gonna continue using eBay, right? So only two network effects. And then you come to Bitcoin. So far, we have identified, those of us who love researching Bitcoin, looking at the market, following the history of Bitcoin, the players in Bitcoin, we have identified seven network effects. I'm going to go through them tonight, but just to make you understand that probably one of the most successful companies in the internet, eBay, only had two. Bitcoin so far, being 11 years old, has seven. And those of you who are Christians and spiritual people, you will understand the significance of the number seven, but let's not talk about that. So I'm going to just go through the seven network effects that Bitcoin has that show you why Bitcoin will be the winner. And in my mind, why Bitcoin is already the winner, no matter what happens, right? Roger Ver was one of the foremost activists and promoters of Bitcoin, passionate about Bitcoin. And then a small thing that's called block size happened, right? And he got emotional and angry. And he was like, I'm going to build a better Bitcoin that goes back to the fundamentals of Satoshi Nakamoto in the white paper. I think you can meet Roger Ver these days. You should ask him how it's going there by Bitcoin Cash. You know, he's one person who has learned what I'm about to share with you tonight. The power of network effects, that you can actually have a better product and still fail miserably, right? So the first network effect is called speculators. The first people to get into the space of Bitcoin, where I'm going to talk about them at a later stage, they are also part of the network effects, where engineers, computer engineers, developers, all those kind of things. Because, I mean, it was posted on Reddit, which is where these people, that's the environment that they play in. And they were just doing it just because it's another computer program that we can use and play with. But after it became famous or sort of popular, people who started buying it were buying it to see. Like, let me see what this thing is about. So they were speculating on it might not. It might increase in value, it might not. So let me maybe put $100 in it and see. And by then, if you take $100 and you buy Bitcoin, you get a lot of Bitcoin, right? So they would do that and then wait and see. If they see the value going up, that would increase their speculatory energy and would suggest to them that perhaps you should put more of your fiat currency into this thing, because we are speculating again that it might go up in value at a later stage. So you do that. The more people see the value of something go up after they've put money into it, they can't stop talking. Now, you and I are in network marketing. We know that word of mouth is one of the most powerful tools that human beings have. And human beings love talking about good things. So as soon as you start making a little bit of money, hey, you will never stop talking about this thing. So you start telling people, hey man, 2 years ago, I put 1,000 rands into this thing, man. I don't know what it is. I don't even care about it, but I saw it and I was like, hey, let me just taste, man. Put my feet in the water. You know, as black people who never swim, but we put the feet in the water just to taste. So you do that, and then you come back to it 2 years later, you check it and you're like, how? This thing is 15,000, but I only put 1,000. Hi, no man, let me take out all my savings and put them in here. 6 months later, after you increase from 15 to 40 or 50,000, now it's over 200,000. Now you're telling everyone, this thing is amazing, guys. You have to get into the space. So now they start putting a little bit of money in there, and then it crashes. It crashes. And then they're like, oh my God, you advised us to put money in this thing. Now we've lost money. You are so horrible as a person. And like, you also feel guilty because you also don't understand Bitcoin at that point. You're just like, I saw this thing making money, guys. So I started telling my friends, because I mean, I didn't want you guys to lose out, but I've lost also. So I don't know, guys, But then because your ancestors are very powerful, They numb you and your feelings, and they prevent you from taking this thing out. So you leave it. And then your friends are like, this one is stupid. He's always coming up with these new ideas of his. Let's just take as much, the little that we have in these wallets and leave him alone, right? 2 years goes past, and then the value shoots up again. You are sitting with your wife watching Rhythm Seat. The 7 o'clock hits, the news come. And then they start speaking about currencies. How you see now, after they speak about gold, rands, now they're speaking about Bitcoin. You're like, how? But this is the things that I spoke about 2 years ago. Let me actually check, because now they're saying the price is this much. The last time I checked and I spoke to my friends and we fought over this thing's price was extremely low. Now it is even 5 or 7 times more than what I had at its height. So you go and you check, and you're like, baby, we're going to Dubai. We are going to Dubai because I have $1 million rands now worth of Bitcoin. You still don't understand Bitcoin. So the basic understanding is not there, but you know that it makes money. It has some kind of value. You don't know how to measure that value. You don't know where that value comes from, but you know it's there, right? So that keeps you around, and it keeps you spreading the word to other people who join you. So that's the first network effect that Bitcoin has. It has speculators in it, the people who come in and put money in and make money over time. All right. Now, some of the other speculators are much more well educated and well researched. And these are the people who will come in and say, in 2010, 2011, people like Max Kaiser, like, yes, like, they read the white paper and they immediately understand what's going on. And they're like, Jesus Christ, I'm going to speculate on this thing, but I am never going to take my fiat currency out of this thing, no matter what happens. Because I understand the white paper so much that my passion for this thing, it says to me, I should put everything I've got into it. I mean, in 2011, I don't know if you guys know Max Kaiser. Max Kaiser Bitcoin was $10, $1 or $10, somewhere there. It was very cheap. He was advocating, he's a journalist, by the way. He used to be a Wall Street banker in America, and he resigned after he realized that banks were screwing people. And he became a journalist, an investigative journalist in the Financial Times. And he has a show on RT, Russia TV. So on this show, he would always tell people about this Bitcoin thing, Bitcoin this, Bitcoin that, you should buy Bitcoin, what, you know. That's someone who understood and understands the fundamentals of it after reading the white paper. And he's like, I'm putting everything in here. Whether the price goes up, whether the price goes down, Max Kaiser will never take his currency out because he understands. He's like, me, I see the future of the world going here. So instead of taking it out, the more money I make in this world, the more of it I'm going to take and put it into this thing at whatever price, because I know that there's value in this thing. So those are the guys who are speculators, yes, but they are speculators who go into the space for the store of value characteristics that we spoke about when I spoke about money way back in one of our first Ruby Luck talks. So that's the store of value issue that we are talking about. They get into the space for that. Now, speculators, why are they important? Why do we say they are part of network effects? Network effect means that it causes a ripple effect. When you throw a stone into the ocean, there's a ripple effect. That ripple effect results in certain things happening in the space. Now, because there are speculators, because there are people who are interested in this thing, there has to be people to provide infrastructure and platforms so that people can access this thing. Now, the first people to offer this were wallet companies. So in 2010, 2011, people started saying, can we build wallets? Things that will allow people to buy these things and hold them. So now you can see that speculators have already encouraged another business to grow from this industry that we know as cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, and that is the wallet business. You have Luno, you have VALR, you have local Bitcoins, you have Coin Mama, you name them. So you can already see that in the world, Bitcoin has already created this large infrastructure of businesses that are extremely successful, that employ hundreds of thousands of people across the world, that are building this specific thing in the network called wallets that enables people to tap into the Bitcoin environment when they want to taste what is going on, right? So that's why it's important. And then lately, you will have other people getting PayPal. PayPal is one of Swift network, which is across the world. Now, Swift is one of the things that Bitcoin threatens extremely because Bitcoin is both a payment system and a settlement system in one. But again, we shall talk about that on another day. So PayPal is now getting into the space. PayPal has 300 million across the world. So it is increasing the PayPal cost on our platform. That increases the number of people that are going to start using and participating in the Bitcoin space. Now, moving along to number 2. That was just number 1. And if just from there, you can understand that this is powerful because there's no wallet in the world that was built for Ethereum. It's not there. Wallets in the world incorporated Ethereum. Every wallet is built to allow you to get Bitcoin. And then they realize that, okay, there's this other thing called Ethereum. Let's try to find a way to accommodate it. Then they do. And then at a later stage, they're like, we see this thing that is trying to make a move called Bitcoin Cash. Let's also try to incorporate it. And then they see that it's failing, and then they kick it out. But at the end of the day, this thing was established to allow you to interact with Bitcoin. All right. Now, number 2 of the network effects that we are talking of is called merchants. Now, as soon as merchants realize and see that speculators are out here speculating on this thing called Bitcoin, they're like, how do we get in? We are merchants. We want where the money is. And we see that people are seeing value in this thing. So what we need to do is allow these people to use this thing to buy goods and services from us as merchants. So merchants start saying, we accept Bitcoin. And then that is another network effect that makes Bitcoin bigger, that grows Bitcoin, that gives it the power, that gives it the significance, that gives it the competitive advantage, etc., etc. So they accept this Bitcoin, and the last time I counted, we had over 300,000 merchants global that accept Bitcoin. That number is probably much higher now because the past 4 months have really been extremely transformative in the Bitcoin space, like exponential growth in almost every level of cryptocurrency. So I would go as far as saying we have more than 500,000 merchants across the world who now accept Bitcoin, right? So they know that you guys see value in this thing and you're speculating on it. So they want to allow you to interact with them using that thing because they know that you see value in it, and therefore if you do, they will also see value and get that value from you. So that's the merchants, the number 2 network effect of Bitcoin. Number 3 is the consumers. Now, once you start realizing that this thing can make you profit, remember I gave you a simple example of Stilo and his wife sitting there watching the news and realizing, 2 years ago I put money into this thing, the price is now 5 times what it was. He goes and he finds that now he has R1 million in his wallet worth of Bitcoin. Now he becomes a consumer. So he moves from being a speculator to become a consumer because now you have 1 million. You've never had R1 million in your life. As soon as you see it, you want to what? You want to consume. So you want to buy stuff, right? So that's a third network effect that Bitcoin has. As soon as people start making profits from it, in terms of the measurement that we use, which is called fiat currency, they're like, they cannot wait to spend it. So they try to spend it as much as possible everywhere. They buy cars, they buy houses, they buy holidays, they buy goods and services across the world, right? That links to the second network effect of merchants that I referred to. So the third one is consumers. Consumers are generally, firstly, speculators, and then secondly, consumers after they profit from being speculators. And the reasons that then lead them to use Bitcoin, I just want to expand on it just a little bit. So some of them will just use it because they can see that, it's making them profit. So instead of using Bitcoin, they will actually now convert the Bitcoin back into their currency, local currency, and then start buying products and services. But then those who, again, are like Max Kaiser, who recognize the value of this, who will be like, okay, if I want to buy a holiday outside of South Africa, it's much quicker and more efficient and much safer for me to use Bitcoin than to use banks or cash. Because if I use Bitcoin, the transaction will most likely take 10 minutes At most, if it takes too long, it's going to be an hour. Whereas if you use a banking system or a travel agency, the payment might take 5 days before it's approved. But now you realize that if I use Bitcoin, I can buy a holiday from South Africa to Canada in 10 minutes, and the transaction is complete. There's nothing else. It's complete in 10 minutes, right? So some consumers start to realize that, okay, this thing is much more efficient than what I'm used to. So instead of converting their Bitcoin back into their local currency, they're like, look, I'm an international person. I'm a businessman who travels across the world. It's much more efficient for me to use this thing for my purchases across the world than to convert it to the local currency, because I'm creating more work for myself. I get charged more fees. So what's the point? You see? So then some consumers then start finding value beyond consuming, but they understand that, okay, this thing has become a much more better payment system than the current one that I'm using. It's much safer, it's much faster, it's more efficient and effective at executing transactions, right? Now, number 4, we'll then move to miners. Miners are probably one of the most critical and important network effects of the Bitcoin system. So miners are those people or those companies that have mining computers, they build mining farms, and then they verify Bitcoin transactions in the blockchain, then they get rewarded with Bitcoin, right? Okay, so that's what they do. Why are they important? One, it should be obvious if you understand Bitcoin. They're important because they are the ones that lead to the production of Bitcoin. Without miners, we wouldn't have Bitcoin because no one would be doing the work that is necessary to verify the transactions in the blockchain, and therefore no one would be rewarded for doing that work because no one would be doing that work. The system would have collapsed a long time ago because it would not be secured, because another major role that miners play is the securing of the Bitcoin network, right? And then another thing is the most important one. I spoke about this again when I was making the case of Bitcoin being more successful or a better asset than gold. I told you guys about Bitcoin having a 120 quintillion processing power, which no other computer in the planet has, right? So miners are the ones that provide that processing power. Because of the number of mining companies we have and the number of mining systems we have installed and working on a day-to-day basis, we have this huge processing power behind Bitcoin. That is the processing power that secures Bitcoin payment network is by far the largest computer power in the world. There's no, someone actually did a calculation to say if you take the 5 biggest supercomputers in the world and combine them, they still don't have even half of the power that the Bitcoin processing system has. And you will understand if you have 120 quintillion hash power per second, not even per day, per second, you are in the league of your own. Ethereum doesn't even get close. Like we can't even speak about anything else after Ethereum. Like you have to understand that there's nothing else after that. And that on its own, if you are someone who understands the value of the internet, the value of data, the value of privacy, and the value of security in the internet, we shouldn't even be having a conversation further, because you would understand why there's so much value in this thing called Bitcoin. Someone like Peter Schiff and some of the economists who are opposing Bitcoin don't understand that, because they keep saying, but it doesn't have value. It's a speculation engine. It's a full speculation and people are going to lose. But I mean, do you understand that this is the most powerful computer power system we've ever had in the planet? And computers run the world today. Like if you understood that, you wouldn't even dare stand on a stage and spew that bile that Peter Schiff and some of these other economists are doing. But they don't have the understanding. So it's fine. What can we do? Right? So that was number 4, the miners. Number 5, I spoke about these people because they are, according to my knowledge, they are the first people to adopt the system and start using it. And these are the software developers and engineers. One of my best friends, his name is Bongani. I lived with him. I met him in my first year, and we lived in the same flat. He was my roommate. He was studying something called mechatronics engineering at UCT. And he qualified, and he's now a software engineer. He started working for Take a Lot, and then I introduced him to this Bitcoin thing. And he knows that I was extremely passionate about it. But he was like, I'm not network marketing chief, I'm not going to do that. Right? And then I moved from Cape Town and I came to Joburg. Jiki, next thing I see, Bongani is now working for a blockchain company in Cape Town as a software engineer. I'm like, how? Chief, you didn't tell me. It's like, hey, bruh, when you told me about this thing, I saw the value, but I was just not ready to join it in terms of network marketing. But I realized where the value was, so I found another way to be a part of it. And I saw an opportunity to become a software developer in the space. So he's actually in the space, literally on a day-to-day basis. They participate in working solutions, solving problems in the Bitcoin system. So you have software developers across the world from different ethnic groups and different countries who have invested their energy, their time, and their effort and their intellect into the Bitcoin space. The Bitcoin space has more software developers than any other company in the world, who are working on a day-to-day basis to solve software problems and build new systems that can support Bitcoin. One of the best systems to come out of the software engineering group of people is called Lightning Network, which I explained to some other lady who was asking me about this low transaction and the low number of transactions that each block can have. And I explained that software developers are behind the scenes working very hard to ensure that they can improve the system called the Bitcoin network system. And they've built this thing called Lightning Network, which can create a block out of chain and take hundreds of thousands of transactions and verify them out of chain, then do the settlement on the blockchain. And it increases the time that the transaction takes to complete and settle, and it also makes it more efficient, and it allows a Bitcoin to solve and verify many more transactions per 10 minutes than it did before they built the Lightning Network. So such products and such things are happening behind the scenes on a day-to-day basis, and these things improve the Bitcoin network and the Bitcoin system. This is why whoever is going to come and try to compete will have to be able to say, I have something better that can lure software developers away from Bitcoin to my product. That is going to be extremely difficult when someone has already invested 5 to 7 years of their lives in this thing, right? So that's the fifth network effect of Bitcoin, the software developers. Normally, software developers are people who understand what hacking is. So when they go into a place to develop their own systems, they will look to build their applications on the most secure blockchain protocol. And to this date, because of the number of people that participate in it, because of the number of miners in the space, because of the number of years that Bitcoin has been attacked for and survived, software developers realize and recognize that, okay, Bitcoin is the one because it's the safest. I mean, it's been going on for 11 years, live for 11 years. It's been attacked every single day of those 11 years by different hackers from different countries, and they've all failed. They've all failed, right? So software developers are looking at those things and saying, okay, no, we need to take part in this thing, because this is where we can build our products and services and know that they will be secure, right? I'll give you an example. Two of the most successful software companies in the cell phone industry are Apple and Google. Apple was successful and it beat BlackBerry and Nokia mainly because, not just because they built the first iPhone or smartphone, sorry, but mainly because they allowed software developers to build apps on their systems, and they made it a very easy and cheap thing to do, right? Google realized that, and they quickly also built their own system, which is called Android. So Google, even before they built a phone, they were like, okay, this app thing allows software engineers from across the world to build products on a platform. If we can give the engineers a platform that is free to build products and services, then we can attract consumers for those products, and then we can build a product that consumers can put those apps into. Because already we know that we have people who will buy this thing before we even build it, right? So Apple and Google were very successful in that they created Android iOS and Apple iOS that allowed software developers to build products and apps on those things for very cheap or for free at most, right? Now, number 6 and number 7 are not so obvious network effects. But number 6 is financiers. Now, I'm in the financial services industry. Silo was also in this financial services industry. The financial services industry is always looking to come up with new products, right? The collapse of the 2008-2009 global financial crisis was mainly caused by new products that were created in 2001-2003 by banks. These are called MBSs, mortgage-backed securities, CDSs. There's a lot of names and a lot of products. But the category of products is called derivatives. Again, too technical. I'm not going to explain that to you. You don't need to know it, right? Derivatives were created. Derivatives are basically just something that is a representative of an underlying value or product. So Bitcoin has already given people in Wall Street, the bank stars and the financiers, an opportunity to say, ooh la la, here's a new version of gold. We can create an ETF for this thing. So an ETF, there's a company in South Africa called Easy Equities. Easy Equities will tell you, guys, everyone can invest in the stock market, even for as little as 5 Rand. What Easy Equities basically does is, let me see, how can I put this simply? Is to create a unit trust that is not necessarily a unit trust, right? It's a basket of stocks that they create, but then they allow you to buy a piece of that basket for however much, for as little as 5 Rand. And then they say, when this basket goes up, you gain in terms of the small share that you have in Easy Equities basket on the JSE. So you're not necessarily buying shares yourself in the JSE. You are just taking part through Easy Equities, right? So Easy Equities has something that basket thing, we call it an ETF, right? So you buy, the way that you invest in the stock market is that you go into the stock market through an ETF. Now, some of the biggest ETFs in the world are the FTSE 100, which is in Europe, in Germany, the S&P 500, which is in the United States of America. The S&P 500 basically measures the shares and stock prices of 500 of the biggest market cap companies on the New York Stock Exchange. And which other one? I forget, but I think there's another stock exchange where they just take the biggest companies, combine them, they make 500, and then they measure their value. You can buy a piece of that. It's an ETF. You buy a piece of that. Then we have something called the NASDAQ. Now, NASDAQ takes the biggest technology companies. So that's where you'll find your Facebook, your Amazon, your Apple, your Google, your Netflix under the NASDAQ. So instead of buying a Facebook stock directly, you buy an ETF, which is called the NASDAQ, right? So gold also has ETFs that are listed on different stock exchanges. So instead of people buying gold directly, they buy an ETF, right? So it's important to understand why an ETF is a disadvantage, but I probably we will have a discussion about that in the future. But let me give you an example. When you buy gold, you really, really should want to have gold. But when you buy an ETF, you don't necessarily have gold. You have a claim to gold. That means you might or might not get the gold when you want it. We saw that happen this year when oil prices went negative and a lot of people with money started saying, what's happening now? We don't understand. We need to move our money to a better system. And they wanted to move their money to gold. You realize that people who have bought ETFs, gold ETFs, wanted to take delivery of the gold. Now, ladies and gentlemen, on the first video where I spoke to money versus currency, I explained to you why it's a problem to continuously print currency when you don't have enough gold to back it up. An ETF is nothing different from that, because now you've bought gold, you have this ETF, but now when ish hits the fan and you want to take delivery of that gold, hey, now the people who sold it to you are like, hey, we are so there are no stocks. Like, what do you mean? But you sold this thing to me. Yeah, we were selling it with the idea that you would never want to take delivery of it. You just want to get the value, the increase in value of the currency, of the price of this thing. But now that you want delivery of it, it's like we don't have it. We are sorry, we don't have enough to give all of you who've bought a piece of this ETF, right? Anyway, that's a discussion for another day. So in the 6th network effect of Bitcoin, we have financiers, which are me and Zillo, and people like us, but we are recovered because we actually care about people. So, but you have those ones who have not recovered and they're looking to make money from you. by being regulated by the government, so they look legit, but honest to God, they are the biggest scammers we have in the world. So they will be like, okay, we're going to create a Bitcoin ETF. Since about 2017, there's been companies in the United States of America lobbying to create a Bitcoin ETF. It's just that in the USA, the Securities Exchange has been refusing to give them permission to do it. I mean, it's a good thing, but it just goes to show that Bitcoin has developed to such an extent that people in Wall Street are thinking about building such products around Bitcoin. An ETF is not the only thing. There are many other products that people are building around Bitcoin. So you can understand that from creating a wallet industry to creating a mining industry to creating a software development industry, they've now also created a secondary industry in the banking world where financial products are being developed along the lines of cryptocurrency. So that is a major network effect of Bitcoin. And then the last one, I see that we are 7 minutes over time, but we did start a bit late, so please just bear with me. The last one would then be, this is the be all and end all. This is the reason why some of us are in this thing. This is the future that we are seeing. This is the biggest network effect, which has not taken place too much so far, but which when it does happen, whew, the value of Bitcoin is going to go to places that I don't think we can even imagine today or even fathom, right? So the seventh network effect of Bitcoin, which makes it a first mover's advantage, one of the best ever in the history of economics, of technology companies, of internet companies, of businesses in general, of any product ever launched, is Bitcoin has a potential to become a world reserve currency. That's the seventh network effect of Bitcoin, that it has a potential to become a world reserve currency. Again, when we go back to the first video where we spoke about money versus currency, I told you that currently the United States dollar occupies that position of global reserve currency. But I explained to you the problems with fiat currency, specifically with the dollar being where it is, and the fact that it has been unpegged from gold. It means that the value is just flowing everywhere and it's not controlled. So now we have Bitcoin coming into the space and saying, I'm a deflationary peer-to-peer electronic cash system, according to Satoshi Nakamoto on the white paper. I want to be extremely efficient and effective, and I go from country to country. I'm not defined or prevented by borders to go anywhere. As long as someone has a smartphone, they can use me. I'm efficient. I don't have too many fees. I'm uncensorable. I'm permissionless. So whoever wants to have a safe fiat currency or any currency for that matter that exists, if they really want to have value in it, they have to use me to become the backup. Just like back in the day when gold was used to back up currency. So Bitcoin has that potential. Whether or not they're going to adopt it is another issue. But here's the thing, because of all the other network effects that I've spoken about, including network marketers, which is where I will end, because we are potentially some of the biggest network effect proponents in this industry, because we spread the fire of network marketing using Bitcoin, which means we are growing the knowledge of Bitcoin, we are growing the speculators in Bitcoin, we are growing the miners in Bitcoin, we are growing the software engineers. So we are one of the most important engines in this space, right? But anyway, so whether or not countries adopt Bitcoin as a global reserve currency, the consumers and us, the people who are using, the users of Bitcoin, can actually force Bitcoin to become a global world reserve currency by just refusing to use anything else, right? Or even if we use anything else, but we always fundamentally go back to understanding that the value lies in Bitcoin. And at the end of the day, the market, which is the free market, will end up realizing where the value is and will kick out anything else that is not of value, that is trying to do something else that goes against the values and the principles of Bitcoin. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm hoping that I was able to give you guys a better understanding of why I said 3 or 4 weeks ago, there's no way that anyone can build something that can replace Bitcoin. Bitcoin Cash, for those who don't know, is actually better than Bitcoin technologically. technically, if you use Bitcoin Cash to pay, it's much more faster, it's much more efficient because it has a larger block size, right? But apart from that, really, there's nothing else that Bitcoin Cash has going for it. And Roger Ver thought that because one of the fundamental problems that we identified with Bitcoin was that it had a small block size, which again is something that can change. I mean, it's not like it's a thing that is impossible for us to change. But he was frustrated at the fact that he was not able to get more than 50% of the people who were using Bitcoin at the time to agree to what he wanted, which goes to the thing that we spoke about earlier in one of our videos, where I was speaking about the fact that we don't have a Mugabe effect in Bitcoin. So Roger Ver was trying to be a Mugabe, where he was like, guys, no, we need to do this thing. And people are just like, nah, but we don't feel like doing it. We don't agree with you. And then he got angry. So in Bitcoin, you can't just do something or force something to be done. You have to get consensus. And consensus is 50+1. And unfortunately, he failed to do that. So he decided to go and build a better product. He built it, but it failed, right? And then the nice thing about being Bitcoin and being a software engineer and developer in Bitcoin is that, unlike the CEO of Nokia, you are able to say, what did Roger do with Bitcoin Cash that we don't have here? And how can we incorporate it here? And then you just take that thing and incorporate it in Bitcoin and make Bitcoin better, you see? So it makes it extremely expensive for anyone to try to take over Bitcoin, number one, extremely expensive for anyone to try to compete with Bitcoin. So people, even if they spend billions and billions of US dollars, Bitcoin has been in existence for 12 years actually, but it was only launched 11 years ago to the public. So we have an 11-year track record of people choosing Bitcoin, of companies choosing Bitcoin, of speculators and consumers choosing Bitcoin, of miners investing their energy, their electricity, their land, their farms to buy mining equipment that mines Bitcoin, not any other cryptocurrency. So any other cryptocurrency that wants to compete with Bitcoin to a point where it can actually push Bitcoin from the number one spot has to kill all those things that I've spoken about tonight. They have to destroy all those. They have to make sure that they can convince all the people who mine cryptocurrency today to move their mining power and hash power from Bitcoin, away from Bitcoin, to their cryptocurrency. That, I mean, I don't know, like nothing is impossible in the world, but I really don't know who has that power, you know, to do that. I just don't see it in my eyes, right? And I think that every other person in the past 4 months who is an institutional investor has been able to be in a position to see that there's no other cryptocurrency but Bitcoin. All the other cryptocurrencies exist to take away your Bitcoin. They are essentially scams because they are trying to get as much Bitcoin from you as possible because they also know that the value is Bitcoin, right? Now, the last thing that I just want to talk about is in terms of this world reserve currency that I'm speaking about. When you are running a business, especially a business that is publicly listed and is big, there's something called a treasury department. Just like every government has a treasury department, every very big successful business has a treasury department. A treasury department is where you make sure you make money and you keep that money and you develop it. Now, a lot of institutions across the world this year, realized that their treasuries were being destroyed, one, by inflation, two, by interest rates being negative. So they're keeping hundreds of millions of their US dollars treasuries, which are in bonds, in real estate, in different types of things. But they're realizing that interest rates keep going down, and they're realizing that the rate of inflation continuously increases beyond even the fiat currency itself. Inflation is increasing in fiat currency, and inflation is also increasing in the other assets that these people are buying, which are the real estates and all those things. That's another deeper part of inflation that I hope Silo spoke about last week, which is the Cantillon effect, right? So that deeper part of inflation that people don't know, hey, that's the killer, that one. That is the reason why we have the inequality gap between rich and poor. That is what keeps people poor, the poor poorer, and that is what makes the rich richer, right? So now these CEOs of these big companies are sitting there and saying, I can't be losing 25 to 30% of my 500 million US dollars just because it's sitting in a bank and it's not gaining any interest because I'm now paying the bank to keep my money because then the interest rates in Switzerland are -3, right? Instead of positive for me to earn money, encouraging me to put more money in the bank. So I'd rather take this cash, this treasury out of the bank and find somewhere else to put it. Can I put it in real estate? No. I've spoken about it. I spoke about it the last time I was making an argument for Bitcoin being an asset class, to say the other asset classes are already too inflated. They are in a bubble space. If you want a real bubble, those people who are still arguing that Bitcoin is a bubble, I mean, hey, there are serious bubbles out there. Yes, Bitcoin has places and times and periods where it's in a bubble, but we are speaking about things that have been in a bubble for a very long time. And when they collapse, like for example, the student debt in the United States of America is over $1 trillion US. The number of jobs that the United States is able to create on a yearly basis doesn't even cover the number of people that come out of college, which means that those people are not making the income necessary to allow them to repay the student loans, which means that is the bubble waiting to burst, right? That's one of the biggest bubbles that is waiting to burst. Bitcoin's market cap is currently at 355 million US dollars, 55 billion US dollars, pardon me. And the student debt market in the US is 1 trillion, over 1 trillion. So you can see which is the bigger bubble there. And there's no solution inside for the student debt, but we know where Bitcoin is going. So as the CEO of a company, you're sitting there and thinking, where do I put my money? I can put it in gold, but gold has an inflation rate of 2% approximately per year. So that means I'm still losing 2% of my currency every year of my treasury, right? Which is not bad because I can hedge that. I can hedge that with some other things and still try to make a profit out of that money. So it's not as bad as putting it in the bank and losing 25 to 30%, but still I'm losing. Are you trying to tell me that everywhere in the planet today, there's no way I can put my 500 million US dollars where I'm not losing some of it? And then someone says, no, but there is a place. It's called Bitcoin. Year on year, it goes up by more than 100% since it was invented. It's actually gone over hundreds of thousands of percent since it was invented. It's the fastest growing asset in the world. And then the CEO is like, oh my goodness, okay, this is where I need to put my treasuries. So when businesses start doing that, they start settling transactions for Bitcoin instead of using the US dollar or fiat currency to settle transactions. That is what leads Bitcoin to potentially becoming a world reserve currency. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attention tonight. I hope that you got value from what I've provided with you. And I hope that it wasn't too technical because it had the potential to be. I tried to take a very technical subject today and make it as simple to understand as possible so that you can understand why we spend so much of our time and energy in this industry, specifically advocating for Bitcoin. Not criticizing any other cryptocurrency, but making you understand the space. Because you can use any ways that you want to use to make money, but if you want to create wealth and preserve it, there's only one way, and it's Bitcoin. Thank you very much.